Okay, this is 3dminiatures.com again with another tutorial on how to put some leaded glass windows in your terrain projects. Now here we have a section of a wall made from Hurst Arts molds. You can go to castlemolds.com to buy them. They're quite nice. They make up some nice terrain. And above the door here we have a small window. Now what I'd like to do is put in some glass on this. Now back in the good old days, they couldn't make large sheets of glass very consistently, and it was common if they could make it smaller pieces that they would do a leaded glass window. And you kind of see this on Victorian era reproductions of older buildings. And what they would do is they would make little smaller pieces of glass, and then they would use lead cane to join them together to make one larger sheet. And some buildings still use this today because it's considered retro. But you can also use this technique, and besides the different materials I have to give different types of effects. So here's a piece of wire mesh. You can get this at art supply store or a craft store. It's aluminum. In this case it's got a diamond pattern, but you can use a little square mesh if you want. It doesn't really matter. You could paint it black before you do this. I have this en natural. But if you paint it black, it would probably show up a little better. And so what I've done is I've trimmed it to be just a little bit bigger than the window. And so what you're going to want to do is, the first step of this is it's going to be held in initially by friction. So we're going to put this down, and I'm going to turn it over. So I push it in from the back so the front hopefully is nicer looking. Let's see if I've got this thing good. I want to fold the edges just a little. I mean, you know, this is miniatures. It doesn't have to be perfect, and you could trim it even just a little tighter to be better. I think I'll actually do that here. Whack a little more off. There we go, and now we try and push him in from the back. And then what you can do is put your finger on the front and kind of try and get him centered and gripping all the corners properly. And nice and flat in there. So from the front now, it looks like this. Okay. And you may have seen these type of windows on some older buildings, or maybe if you've ever been to like Europe or England, because these were common, especially, you know, they couldn't make large panes, and so they would make a window out of smaller panes of glass. And now that that's done, then we get our glue. I like the clear glues, like this is Aleene's Tacky Glue, or they have a clear Elmer's Schoolcraft Glue. These dry very clear and transparent, and they do dry off a texture, so it won't be perfectly smooth, but then the old school glass really wasn't perfectly smooth. And so first what we're going to do is we're going to kind of just put a bead around the edge. I know it looks like an awful lot of glue, but that's okay. It dries surprisingly thin, and then just kind of drizzle some over the glass. And you want to make sure you hit the edges so that when it dries, it's glued in place. And then you can take your toothpick and you can help spread this guy going. Now, another thing you can try and do, and I'll show this with a smaller window, is you can put a lot of glue around the edge and use your toothpick. You can draw down a complete sheet of unsupported glass. But the problem is that the window has to be small, because else the surface tension will rupture the glue. So for these larger windows, you can't do the thing where I make a big old blob of glue at the top and then draw down a complete sheet. You've got to divide the space up. In this case, we're using the wire mesh, but you could also theoretically simply just stick a couple sticks in there to make smaller divisions, and then put a skin of glue between those as well. So, you know, so make sure you got all the little holes filled. If it takes another coat, you can do that. So there we go. It looks kind of thick right now, but that's from the back. And then from the front, as it dries, it'll actually get thinner on you. And if it's too thick, you can push the glue around a little bit. And eventually, when you think it's good, lay it flat to dry. And then if there's any little windows that popped or didn't get covered, you know, you can patch those up as well, or you can turn it upside down and let some drain to the top. Whatever works. This is a pretty flexible method. And they do sell special materials for this, but you know, the whole using glue stuff works pretty well too. And so don't mind the air bubbles either, because that's historically accurate. The uneven texture of the glass and having bubbles in it and other distortions would actually be historically accurate. And so, you know, when you're done here, you'll have a layer of glass. And then for extra effect, if you want, you can take your hobby knife, if it's supposed to be like a ruin, and just punch out some of the windows, or, you know, cut them out, whatever you're trying to do for whatever effect. And if some of them don't skin over all the way, you can just simply come back and do another coat and finish them up later. So voila, there is our old school leaded glass window. Would be very at home inside of a steampunk setting, such as a war machine or all that, because the Victorian era, while they could make larger panes, a lot of them liked the old school retro effect. There was a fondness in England for the England that never was, and so if we want to take the same view and echo that in your fantasy background, steampunk or war machine, then, you know, that may be a popular idiom there as well. So there you go. A leaded glass window using aluminum mesh and some clear craft glue.